tonight's meeting. Councillor Duncan.
Sorry, I'll be asking some questions about HTS, and it's a non-pecuniary interest as a non-executive of HTS.
I know you're paying Councillor Duncan.
Okay. One time I will get it right.
And I'm grateful for your declaration. I've been here myself. Are there any further declarations of interest for this meeting? There are none. Okay, we now move to the minutes of the previous meeting on pages 3 to 12. Are there any matters arising as a result of those minutes? If there are no matters arising from those minutes, I shall sign them. Thank you, Adam. We now move to questions from the public, and that's in your supplementary document at the Cabinet, agenda item 5, page 2. Can I call Mr. Leverett? Mr. Leverett. Now, Mr. Leverett, you have a question. Would you like to read out your question?
Yes, please. Good evening to you, Chair, and good evening, members. My question is to Councillor Michael Hardware, Portfolio Holder for Strategic Growth. It's regarding the Town Centre Master Plan. Can the Council, for the sake of transparency, tell us the cost of the interim planning guidance report for the Town Centre, which was provided by consultants for a presentation this evening?
And Mr. Leverett, would you like the reply from Councillor Harlow read?
I think everybody should hear how much it's cost, yes, thank you.
Councillor Harlow.
Thank you, Chair. The Council has invested £93,000 to produce a substantial, detailed master plan for the town centre. It will become an important material consideration in planning terms for projects in the town centre, for applicants when producing proposals, for officers when considering those proposals, and for members when deciding the applications. This is the first of its kind and will ensure that we attract the right investment into the town centre in keeping with our regeneration plans.
Now, Mr. Leverett, do you have a supplementary?
I do, sir.
Would you like to read your supplementary question?
Yes, as we're all aware, the council struggled to keep the green space right in the town because we had a lot of it and the costs are phenomenal. We had reduced budgets. As the new plan shows lots of green space and trees in the town centre, what proposals could the council have to maintain the additional green space that we have within the town?
Thank you, Mr. Leverett. Councillor Harlow, would you like to reply?
Thank you. This is a framework document which is going to put down for consultation. Its theme is to bring green back into the town centre quite extensively. And of course, when that happens, arrangements for its ongoing maintenance will be made at that time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Harlow. Now, Mr. Leverett, you have a second question. Would you like to read that out?
Thank you. The residential planning applications already approved by the council in the town centre have reduced parking provisions. The proposals to the town centre master plan report suggests that the Post Office Road car park will be lost in the scheme. Does the council consider the lack of parking the right approach to revitalise retail businesses in the town when the competition from out of town retail provides an abundance of free parking?
Councillor Harlow, just respond.
Thank you. At present, there are no firm proposals to remove the Post Office car park. Post Office Road car park. The master plan provides a planning framework and not a set of detailed proposals. However, the master plan does indicate that this site may be suitable for future development.
Thank you very much. I have no additional questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Leverett. Okay, we now move, as there are no further questions from the public, we now move to questions from councillors. We have one, Councillor Edwards. Would you like to read out your question?
The question is for Councillor Alistair Gunn. Please could you detail your understanding of Harlow Council and or HTS's responsibilities with respect to the maintenance of the Northgate Roundabout, and if the Council stroke HTF have any responsibility for this roundabout, why has it been so badly neglected for well over a year?
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Councillor Gunn, would you like to reply?
Thank you. Essex County Council is responsible for maintenance of the highway, including roundabouts. This includes some works to vegetation where that is necessary for highway safety, such as sightlines and direct risks to road. Essex County Council makes an annual payment to Harlow Council for the maintenance of vegetation on highways lands in Harlow for these purposes. Harlow Council, through HTS, carries out where practicable work on highways land over and above the minimum required standard, mainly in order to improve the appearance of its area. It has never been practicable to carry out landscape works on the roundabout at the junction of 4th Avenue and Northgate due to its design, as access cannot be obtained safely without closing the road to traffic. The Council is in discussion with Essex County Council regarding the most appropriate means of resolving this issue. Discussions are currently underway with regard to installing hard surfacing on the roundabout to prevent future maintenance requirements.
Thank you, Councillor Gunn. Councillor Edwards, do you have a supplementary?
I do. I do, Councillor Gunn. It begs a number of questions, but I believe I'm only allowed to ask one. The questions it begs are how much in terms of the annual payment. It also begs the question of why was this matter first raised with Essex. But my question, which I'm going to ask you, is do we have any idea of the time scale as to how long it's going to take to get this matter resolved, given that it's been over a year since I raised the matter at the council meeting? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Councillor Gunn, would you like to respond to the supplementary?
As best I can. I mean, we are looking to Essex County Council to work with us on this and find a solution. I can't set timelines that are out of my own control, not being an Essex County councillor. But we are working with them. I recognise the urgency of improving the street scene of Harlow. I think that's why we're in this position. And I agree with you that roundabout is an eyesore that does need to be addressed.
Thank you, Councillor Gunn. As there are no further questions from councillors, we move to the next agenda item. There are no petitions that I'm aware of that have been presented for Cabinet to you. That means that we move to agenda item 8 on pages 13 to 31, which is the forward plan. Do we have any questions on the forward plan? I see Councillor Durkin.
Thank you, Chair, and can I welcome you to the Chair for this first time chairing the Cabinet meeting. Mine is specifically related to page 21 around contracts awarded for external refurbishment, and as a non-executive of HTS, I'm asking what will the Cabinet do to encourage and ensure that all activities should be given to HTS as a priority to make sure that we get best value for money.
Councillor Durkin, I'm grateful for your question, and Councillor Carter, if I may come in first of all and then defer to you if you would like to add any further comments. It is true, Councillor Durkin, that I'm collecting a number of interim roles which will shortly be handed over, but I look forward to chairing the rest of this. I'm enjoying the rest of this Cabinet meeting. I think your question is particularly important as we've hit a milestone. We have signed off the HTS scoping paper for their business plan. The ambition going forward will be that we have a full business plan that will be presented to the shareholder subcommittee in February next year. I want to congratulate not only the council officers that have been involved with that work, but also the politicians cross-party that share an ambition to prime the efforts of HTS as it goes forward. One of the elements of that scoping paper, and I would urge all councillors to read it, is that there is an identified pipeline of potential opportunities alongside some future market potential to look outside of Harlow's boundaries. This is an exciting time for HTS and the council, and the potential to maximise the return on investment that taxpayers have invested into this vehicle. And I know that there is a shared ambition amongst all politicians irrespective of colour. Councillor McCarter, would you like to add anything to that?
Thank you. Just briefly, yes, there is an assumption that.
Dear, sorry.
But,
Don't worry, we know who you are.
Good. There is an assumption that the external works will go to HCS. There is an £8 million capital budget item for it for ongoing works. But two issues. It has to be value for money. There is a process in the business case they put forward. But also, some of these contracts will be for specialist work, asbestos and stuff like that, for which HCS do not have the right skills. So certainly, so the assumption is yes, they will go to HCS, but there will be some which can't or won't.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Devlin, do you have any further questions in the floor?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions from councillors on the forward plan? I see no indications. Therefore, we move to the next agenda item, which is agenda item 9, timetable for local plan review, pages 32 to 40. Can I move to Councillor Harlow to introduce this report as the proposer, and then, of course, we will get a seconder.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'm the proposer. Formally propose this. This report deals with the requirements set out by the local plan inspector when it was approved last year to update our local development scheme, which is the programme for reviewing our local plan. This is only in this stage a partial review as required by the inspector, but during this partial review we will also consider the full review, which has to happen by 2025. The key points here are to review the policies in the local plan over the next year, decide which ones may or may not need changing. There are legislative changes that have happened. There are changes to uses class orders, and also the inspector has required us to review the effectiveness of our HMO, Homes of Multiple Occupation policy. We will also set out a timetable for the production of our community infrastructure levy, which we want to introduce. Work is underway at the moment for feasibility on that, which is being funded by Essex County Council, and that will conclude by the end of November, and we hope to bring a report to Cabinet in January. We'll also be taking the town centre master plan, which we're discussing later, into the local plan, because at the moment there is a big black hole in our local plan, which is the town centre, so it has to be filled. And that's it, I think. Thank you.
And just before we move to questions, do we have a seconder for the report?
Seconded.
I see Councillor Swords there. Can we move to questions? I see Councillor Jones.
Can I ask about the mechanism for this? Because is this going to be the members of what is now dubbed the town plan subcommittee, or are we going to actually have another local plan subcommittee of whoever?
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Can I ask Councillor Harlow to respond?
Yes, the newly named town plan panel will retain the responsibility of the local plan and this process.
Thank you.
Do we have any further questions? Councillor Edwards.
Just a point of clarification, please, if I may. If on page 33, it refers to the policy H3, housing in multiple occupation. Have I understood this correctly? In that it appears to be saying that 1 in 5 of a number of houses could be a house in multiple occupation. Is that what they're saying across the town?
Thank you, Councillor Edwards, for your question. Councillor Hardware, could I ask you to respond?
I'm going to defer to my office.
Andrew Branch.
The current policy in the local plan stipulates that more than 1 in 5 of a row of houses cannot be converted to an HMO. in terms of any new HMO developments. What the inspector asked us to do at the local planning examination 2.5 years ago, was to review that policy within 2 years to identify whether we felt it was working for the needs of the town's housing requirements or not.
Do I see any further questions? Councillor Edwards.
Again, just so that I'm absolutely clear on this. So are we saying then that as it stands at the moment, that it would be perfectly possible for every sixth house, as it were, to be a house in multiple occupation?
Andrew Burns, do you wish to respond?
In theory, but in practice that would not happen and could not happen because of the Article 4 direction that the council put in place in relation to HMOs. And the other aspects of the HMO policy in the local plan are that any new HMO has to provide one off-street parking space for every resident of that HMO, and also secure cycle storage space for every resident of that HMO, and sufficient refuse provision for every resident of that HMO. The parking provisions alone make it almost impossible for any, or for the vast majority of dwelling houses in the town to secure HMO status in line with the current policy. So the 1 in 5 is part of it, and that was one thing that the inspector specifically asked us to look at. But other parts of the HMO policy and policy H3 are very restrictive in terms of the parking provisions that would, in effect, prevent most new HMOs coming forward.
Thank you for that reassurance.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Are there any further questions on the timetable for local plan review? Okay, are there any comments? As there are no comments, we'll move to the next agenda item. But before we do that, schoolboy error here from the interim chair of Cabinet. We need to vote on that. Are all those Cabinet members in favour of the report timetable for local plan review? Agreed. Grateful. We now move to agenda item 10, which is the Town Centre Master Plan, pages 41 to 47. Can I ask for a proposer? I see Councillor Swords and a seconder. I see Councillor Harlow. Councillor Swords, would you like to introduce this report?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just want to make 3 very clear points before we move to the questions, and I've no doubt the comments as well. First one, I want to set out why we're bringing forward this SPD now, and I want to be very clear from the off that is what this document is. It's an SPD, it's a supplementary planning document. And I know there'll be those asking why this SPD before the town plan has been adopted, and why we're not waiting until perhaps we have more certainty over things like bids that are in with the government at the moment. But I would say to that end, my answer is very clear. I don't think we have any more time in which we could delay such a document. In my opinion, this document should have been produced some time ago, and the council does not currently have, and has not ever had to my knowledge, a planning framework for the town centre. I again believe that any credible plan for the regeneration town centre would rely on an SPD of this nature. And as members know, we have a number of private applications coming forward in short order that could, if we do not arm planning colleagues with those much needed material considerations, end our plans in some part of regeneration before they've begun. It's well reversed that the council does not at present, and I repeat at present, own much of the land in the town centre, and I believe that the failure to acquire that land leaves us vulnerable to poor private development in key strategic areas of the town centre. And that is why we are acting now comprehensively to arm the council with every possible tool to protect the town centre from an apocalypse of private developments until such point we can step forward to the liberation of those disused buildings and those forgotten areas to deliver what I've said as many times is our once-in-a-generation rebuilding in a town centre. Second, I want to lay bare what this document sets out for the benefit of those who may not have trawled through all 173 pages. In fact, you probably haven't. But it identifies the very clear opportunity areas in the town centre and what the development may look like. It makes clear our position, I believe, on many key policy areas such as height and public realm. But above all, it makes clear that we're not talking about a lick of paint or repaving, a play park or umbrellas. We're talking about a total town centre rebuild, and that's what I commit to deliver. This SPD will beef up the powers we need to do just that and further. Again, arm those comrades in planning with the material considerations needed to deliver what the people of this town and all those whose pens are quivering over their chequebook of investment so desperately want to see: a new, vibrant, thriving town centre that's fit for the 21st century. And third, and this is the point I want to stress most fervently, this SPD is not a development plan. This SPD is a supplementary planning document. And for instance, if I draw members' attention to paragraph 1.1 of the master plan, and quote, provides guidance to inform. That is what this document is here to do. It's in place to provide guidance on planning. It is not a prescriptive development plan, and I've no doubt that a slew of questions as to why we're not placing a straight bench instead of a curved bench on the fourth paving slab from the second tree will be asked. But I would say forget those questions now. They're not relevant to this document. And they're not relevant to any supplementary planning document. And again, if I draw members' attention to paragraph 4 of the covering report, that makes very clear that we will be bringing forward a development plan following town plan adoption. That will be radical, far more radical than, for instance, this SPD may seem, and that will realise the ambition of what I'm talking about with the town centre. And finally, I just want to say, again, that I think this is the first building block, the first stepping stone to the journey that we're embarking on of town centre regeneration, and that we're working relentlessly to deliver.
Thank you, Councillor Swords. Grateful for that opening. We move now to questions. Do we have any questions from councillors? Councillor Vince, first.
Thank you, Chair. Just being to just a few questions. I'm not going to ask about the sofa benches, fortunately. Page 100 of the document, an area of Harlow obviously that I'm quite invested in, for want of a better phrase, Wych Elm. There's a comment on there about pocket parks, and it says that Wych Elm have a generous planting. Can you give me a definition of what a pocket park is and kind of what you envision that looking like in terms of planting?
Thank you, Councillor Vince. Councillor Swords.
Yes, I don't have a strict definition of what a pocket park is to hand, but it's a bit like Ronseal. It does what it says on the tin, in that it's a very small park in a pocketed area, with perhaps, if you're particularly looking at an area where there may be scope for high residential, a high number of residential dwellings. It's a green space in the middle of many of those dwellings. Many major cities across Europe particularly have them in areas of high residential dwellings, and it's bringing that green area into the middle of such a place.
Thank you, Councillor Swords. Just to reinforce that, I think it's an exciting advance in urban planning whereby there has been this consideration about the greening of particularly dense urbanised areas, and I think that complements the green and urban elements of this town, and that's what we're trying to enhance as a result of inserting that type of wording. Further question, Councillor Vince.
Thank you. I just can't quite envisage where it's going to go. Again, this is a question that more as a ward councillor, really. On page 85 of the document, it talks about the junction of 5th Avenue and, I can't say the word, Hammersholt Road. And it's about replacing the current roundabout with a T-junction. I just wondered what the kind of thinking behind that was, and kind of what the sort of research or data, whatever it might be, that kind of come to that conclusion.
Thank you, Councillor Vince. Obviously, highway matters are a consideration for Essex County Council, but Councillor Swords, do you have any comments to add on the back of that question.
Yes, so one of the major issues that's been identified is the fluidity of transport links, particularly roads, around the close proximity to the town centre. And what this document, not just on that point, but throughout, sets out is how we can improve that. That's identified as one possible way of doing so. But again, I would refer you to the fact that this is a supplementary planning document, not a prescriptive development plan. But the thinking behind all of these things is how we can improve accessibility of the town. In the town centre at the moment, it's particularly inward-facing and rejects the vast number of cars that flow around almost the ring road that we have around the town centre, and how we can open that up to invite far more footfall in and improve the fluidity from areas such as the train station, which references the point you've particularly made, but also to other strategic areas, the enterprise zone, and other industrial areas, and how we can improve the transport links to them all.
And look, I appreciate you've got other questions, Councillor, but just to add there, I think it is sensible, forward thinking to understand the level of infrastructure that's going in across the town with the objectives around housing, and how strategically we understand, as Councillor Swords has said, how we're going to connect all the dots there and actually marry up the flow in the town so that it makes residents access to leisure, employment facilities, marry up in a wider vision that actually makes Harlow, as we all know, one of the best places to live. Do you have any further questions, Councillor Williams?
Yeah, just briefly, I noticed on page 42 there's a mention of the cycle routes around the leisure zone roundabout. I'm just sort of a question, I suppose, relating back to the comment that Tony, Councillor Edwards made earlier about the Northgate roundabout. That roundabout is particularly a shocking statement, and just sort of reassurance from you that there will be, and perhaps I'm looking at Councillor Gunn as well, that you know, you'll be working with Essex County Council in much the same way as the Northgate roundabout to ensure that is fit for purpose, because it's I remember driving around it and hitting a brick that was, you know, hanging in the middle of the road at one point. So just that reassurance, please, Chair and Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor Vince. Councillor Swords.
Yes, I can give you nothing but absolute assurance that we'll be doing everything, not just on that roundabout alone, but across the town to regenerate in all corners. And I know that roundabout, as another roundabout that Councillor Edwards mentioned earlier, needs particular attention, and I don't think it's specifically related to the master plan, but on that roundabout, yes, is the assurance I will give you.
Do you have any further questions? Thank you, Councillor Vince. Councillor Durkin.
Thank you, Chair. Because I've got a number of questions, I submitted the questions in advance to Andrew, which I thought was the right thing to do. I have to say, the derogatory comments made by the Regeneration Cabinet member has now made me reflect on that, and I don't think that's actually an appropriate thing to be doing. In relation to the questions, so I've given him advance notice of this, and I do hope he's courteous in his responses, is that on page 7, 1.14, it indicates that the largest employer in the town at the current time is Princess Alexandra Hospital, and this is not included in the master plan. If you actually look at the footfall of people visiting Harlow, the vast majority are going to the hospital and having to drive through or past the town centre. I'm therefore questioning whether or not we are losing an opportunity of not including that site currently in this futuristic plan. Shall I just go through them and get answers and then go through them?
Yeah, we'll take them one at a time,
Okay.
as is convention. But I am sure that Councillor Swords is very keen to answer that question. Councillor Swords, over to you.
Yeah, I think it's a very sensible question, given the location, the current location of PH, and of course it's a very important site in the town. And you rightly highlight the footfall that goes towards that area and travel past the town centre. In terms of your specific point about why is that area not included in what we've just defined as the town centre footprint, I would be very clear currently, and if plans and aspirations that are in place are followed through in terms of the new hospital, that area has a very different characteristics to the town centre. And I know, for instance, you have a view on that should be included. My view is that those characteristics are very different. However, the local plan identifies the site for future housing development and does not envisage that area being part of the town centre. And we are doing forward planning in the next year, we'll commence in the coming months, to start the production of a design brief for that PEH site, so that as and when the site becomes available for development, the council set out a clear and detailed planning framework for that area.
Thank you, Councillor. Just to reinforce that, Councillor Durkin, officers are proactively looking at the matters around that corner of the town at the moment. There is the view at the moment around the footprint as identified in the local plan, but just to give you some reassurance there that officers are proactively thinking about these considerations at this moment in time, and there will be more to say in the coming months around how we're going to designate that particular part of the town.
And my second question, Chair, links to the first one, which is also linked to the response that you've made. As the single largest employer of people who use public services, public access, and therefore use the town centre, etc., we even know, even if the funding is allocated today, it would still take 5 to 6 years to build to actually relocate the current Prince Alexandra to any other site. Therefore, in my opinion, it is absolutely critically important that that public area is put into the master plan. It seems strange, and I ask, why are we choosing a private company such as Sainsbury's to put them into the master plan, but we're not actually putting in a public service, which is Princess Alexandra? But I take your comments and clearly will monitor the situation. If I can move on, if that's okay, to page 13, 2.18, the document mentions criticism about large retail sites. And I'm assuming that they are trying to refer to old department stores such as Debenhams and etc., which we've never had in the town. So I'm a little bit concerned that we are criticising large retail sites when we're actually sitting in a successful large retail site, the Water Gardens, and equally across our shoulders is also an equally successful large retail site, which is called the Harvey Centre. So I'm just asking the Cabinet member, why are we criticising two of our largest employers and largest footfall for retail?
Thank you, Councillor Durkin. I'll come to Councillors momentarily. I would just say, guide you to the fact that, look, in the master plan framework that's set out, there is a clear indication strategically around the vision, particularly for spatial objectives. And we, at this moment in time, need to look at the higher level principles, taking into consideration as well public realm and how that is orientated in the town centre. So there are a range of considerations here at play. Are there any Councillor Swords who may have some additional comments in response to your question?
Yeah, I've made very clear in response to that Harvey Centre and Water Gardens are both very successful retail areas. The master plan does not criticise them in any way. What we're saying, again, at the strategic level, is that looking forward, as this plan does, retail is changing. Retail has changed massively over the past year, past 18 months, and the footprint of town centres and what will be needed in the coming years is also changing. And as I've said many times, we need to be radical in regeneration and take nothing off the table in that sense, because it's only by doing that that we will deliver the town centre that's needed across the board.
Councillor Durkin.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just in response to that one, if we're criticising the two largest retail sectors in the town centre, then who are we criticising in this document because they are the only two largest retail sectors in the town centre. So I do think both the general managers of both may well be quite cautious over the concerns that have been raised by the cabinet member.
I'll just answer that question. The purpose of the purpose of this document, I would urge members to realise the strategic intent here is to have a consultation about the future evolution of the town centre in that context and retail space in general, which is what Councillor Swords said. And so there is no criticism. The portfolio holder has been very clear that he supports the ambitions of the Water Gardens, but we want to have an exciting retail space that combines leisure, and those things are borne out at a strategic high level in this master plan. Further questions from you, Councillor?
Yes, thank you. Just on that one, I think if you read the report, it could be perceived as a criticism. Yes, I'd like to move on to page 15/16, which is the chart at the bottom, which shows strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats. And I was very pleased to note that it is actually referring to poor quality of residential homes for office blocks. And whilst we have several in the town centre, would the portfolio of the area agree with me that the block of Turners House could constitute poor quality of residential homes?
Before I bring in the portfolio holder, I would just say that it is this administration's intent to stand full square behind Article 4 directions, and that has been a consistent position. Actually, in fairness, from the previous administration, it is being carried forward by this administration as well. But Councillor Swords, would you like to say anything further?
Yeah, I think I've made clear my views on some of the poor quality conversions from office blocks and residential, such as the one you mentioned, Councillor Durkin, many times, and my passionate beliefs as to what preventative measures this council could have taken at the time to stop those things happening. I've also made publicly clear many times. But as Councillor Charles has already said, we now stand very squarely behind the Article 4 directives. I wish they'd been brought in earlier. But the wider point I would make, and I know what he's going to allude to, but the wider point I would make is, again, as I've just said with the retail areas, we're taking nothing off the table in our radical regeneration of the town centre. And that means putting right the wrongs of the past, which includes poor quality office to residential conversions. So yes, I do agree with you that they are poor quality. I probably also agree with you that this council should have taken action earlier to prevent those things happening.
Thank you, Councillor Swords. Councillor Durkin.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much for the comments, and it's actually quite pleasing that we hear the cabinet member criticising the Tory government, because it was actually their decision and their planning application that allowed these people to build these. Could I just ask, therefore, if you are agreeing that the block of Turners House could be seen as poor quality, why has the council agreed that the owners of that building are the main sponsors of this year's town award?
Can I just come in here, first of all, and I'll bring in Councillor Swords. Let's be clear about the Town Centre Awards. I think the principle behind the Town Centre Awards is that it is a celebration of our town centre and to recognise where companies and certain activities and initiatives in the town centre are gold standard. And it will be this administration's ambition to have those gritty, difficult conversations with people that we may not agree with, but also celebrate those who do a lot for the town centre. And that's the principle we stand behind. We will not have closed doors to any stakeholder in the town centre, because we need to engage with them to further the ambitions that we all want to see around town centre regeneration. And as you know as well as I do, Councillor Durkin, there has been a long-standing tradition of cross-party support around that. So it is about engagement, to think about the future and deliver something that we can all, in collaboration, have a shared sense of pride in. Councillor Swords.
Yeah, no, very much echo what Councillor Charles just said there. On the sponsorship you mentioned, you were incorrect. Carrigan aren't the main sponsor of the Town Centre Awards. But on the point you make about their sponsorship, they are on currently a major landowner in the town centre, and as Councillor Charles said, we were engaged with all of those landowners. I'm not going to shut the door to anyone because I don't agree with them. We will work with them to do what is right by the town centre. Sponsorship is open to pretty much everyone, and Carradine are one of the 12 sponsors. Sponsorship is not an endorsement at all of any organisation or partnership or their actions, but I think it's a landowner giving back positively to invest in the town centre at present.
Councillor Durkin.
Thank you very much, and just in response to that before we move on, I think there is a double negative there. On one hand, you are agreeing that this is a bad landlord, poor quality, poor building, really antisocial issues, not only for the residents, but actually the people who use the bus station. But at the same time,
So Councillor Durkin, I'm always very happy to give you, as an experienced member, a lot of latitude. But these are questions. You're going to have plenty of time to make your comments. We need to get through these questions because I know that you rightly have a number of them and we want to engage with you. So please do share your thoughts in the comments. But let's get through these questions first of all.
Okay, thank you very much. But just to finish what I was saying, it just seems ironic that we're actually saying one thing here, but actually willing to take the money. In relation to page 43, can I be correct in my assumption? Because the original plan of the master plan was that we were going to build a bus or multi-use pathway between Broadwalk and Market Square that was going to go past Lloyd's Bank and move from the bus station down to, is it Strawberry Fields or Strawberry something or other? And I know there was an argument that we wanted the buses to stop off at the Playhouse so that we could connect both sides of the town. Is it my understanding that that methodology has now changed and the only thing that we're now doing is putting it in a bike lane?
Councillor Salt.
I think the sustainable transport corridor that you're referring to has been routed to retain pedestrian focus in that area, and the bus route will now follow the Post Office Road route. That was a decision taken after an extensive review by officers across ECC, the Garden Town team and this council, and was approved by the previous portfolio holder and the Council Senior Management Board in February 2021, which of course you all know was before the local elections. The routing does not adversely diminish the positive connection, as no bus stops were ever proposed in that Eastgate area.
And look, just from a routine governance perspective, just to share that with you, Councillor Durkin, this council stays absolutely committed to the HGGT principles around the sustainable transport corridors and is working actively with them. So just to complement there what Councillor Salt has said. Councillor Durkin.
Thank you, Matt. Just on another question in relation to that, is that the justification of why we're digging up the road that we already laid to change the levels on that land? Because I visited it only yesterday and people were digging it up.
So again, this is a strategic document. That is an operational consideration, but Councillor Swords, do you have any perspectives on that you'd like to share?
I do, yeah. I know the area you're referring to, Tony, and sorry, Councillor Durkin, and genuinely bemused because that area you're referring to was £1 million accelerated funding given by the government's part of the Town's Fund project. That was a project, that refurbishment of Eastgate was a project you led on and you approved as portfolio holder. So I'm not sure, it's nothing to do with the road, it's repaving, and that was your project, so I thought you would know what it was.
No, sorry, you must have missed the first point of my question. My first point of the question is why are we digging it up again when it was just laid quite recently?
So you referred to a road, it's not a road, it's a pavement.
Okay, I apologise.
Which was the point I was trying to make. If there is an operational matter with perhaps straightening paving blocks, then of course they would have to be relayed to ensure that we get good value for money on that project.
Thank you, Councillor Sauls. Councillor Durban.
Yes, sorry, nearly there. I do apologise for hogging this particular issue. Is it my understanding on page 71, figure 4, linked to page 98 and 99, that actually the idea of building houses, certainly council houses, on the post office car park has now been deleted because it appears from your document that what you are intending to do is remove the car parking and put in its place a garden with sculptures.
Councillor Sauls.
As I made clear in the beginning, there's two parts to this question, but as I made clear in the beginning, this is a supplementary planning document. This is not a prescriptive development plan. I'm not proposing to do those things. They've been identified as potential ways forward. So no, I'm not proposing to do that. But on your point about social housing in that area, very clearly, the last iteration of the Post Office roadside designs, which came forward in 2020, before the local elections, included the park area, which has been retained in this master plan. And it also seeks to protect the mature trees in that area. That site was never included in target social housing numbers, and so there is no impact. We've not deleted or lost anything. No decision has been taken, again, as I just said, on the use of this site. It's a matter of detailed design and a planning application, which is not what this master plan seeks to do. There will be, in fact, on the forward plan, forward work plan, there will be further forthcoming housing strategy, which will in turn very clearly set council policy for types, tenures, locations, and of course we're working between Councillor Carter and I on the house building pipeline, in which the council will deliver a huge number of social homes, because previous administrations have not. But in specific answer to that question, that's not what's being proposed. This is a supplementary planning document to provide a planning framework.
Councillor Durban.
Sorry, so can I just confirm what we are saying in this master plan is that the post office car park would be turned into a garden. It would not be used for any future other development.
Councillor Sauls.
I will say this again, with the hope that you listen. This document,
Sorry, with respect,
but I did actually say, you know, we should deal with this in an adult way. I really don't like
the insults
that I'm receiving. It does seem very
difficult for us as the opposition to ask effective critical questions if all we get is insults.
Councillor Durkin, I am committed to go through all the questions tonight. I think this is an important document. Councillor Sauls, if you would be kind enough to respond to Councillor Durkin, I'm grateful.
This document is a supplementary planning document to provide a policy framework for the town centre, something that council has never had. This is not a prescriptive development plan. This does not set in concrete or even make a bag mix of concrete for any proposals. What this does is provide a policy framework, identify opportunity areas for future development. So no, we are not this evening saying that the post office road car park is going to be turned into a pocket park. This master plan, which is a supplementary planning document, has identified that as an opportunity area, something that, as I just pointed out, the site designs came forward in 2024 under your administration. Those designs have been carried forward to this master plan. So no, we are not saying that this evening. When you were the portfolio holder, you oversaw those site plans, and they have been carried forward to this supplementary planning document.
Councillor Durkin.
Sorry. I will move on to the next particular question, which was a similar question to the Leader of the Opposition, Councillor Vince, which is the definition of a pocket park. And of course in my ward, which is Wych Elm, I was quite surprised that this was identified, and it mentions generous planting. And the only two green areas in Wych Elm that I'm familiar with is the green area in front of the pharmacy and the green area between the garage and the vet. I was just wondering, are these the two pockets that we are referring to, or are we going to design in new pockets of green area that will have generous planting?
Councillor Durkin, forgive me, Councillor Durkin. Breaking precedent here, I have consulted Wikipedia about the definition of a pocket park. And it says, and I quote, this is the first one of the council, but I thought we'll change it up as I'm interim. A pocket park, also known as a pocket or mini park, vest pocket park or vesti park, that's interesting, is a small park accessible to the general public. Pocket parks are frequently created on small, irregular pieces of land in vacant building lots, along the centres of broad avenues, or even in parking spots. So I thought it would be helpful to consult Wikipedia in this moment of need.
But in all fairness, my question wasn't that. My question was, at the moment in Wych Elm, we have two green areas, one in front of the pharmacy and the other one which is by the vets. In this document, are we talking about, as you've explained, another alternative pocket, or are we actually referring to generous planting on those current two sites?
Councillor Swords.
This document does not prescribe any site, anywhere in Wych Elm, anywhere in that town centre area, for specific development. In short order, a detailed development plan, not a supplementary plan document, but a development plan, will be brought forward for the Wych Elm area. In that development plan, it will prescribe exactly what will be going in what areas. So we are not saying this evening that those two areas will be the pocket parks, nor are we saying any two other areas, or perhaps 3 areas or 4 in the Wych Elm area will be pocket parks. What this supplementary planning document does is identify opportunity areas and suggest that pocket parks in the Wych Elm area may be needed, and it would seem that two would be a good number. So in your anticipation for what's going to happen in Wych Elm, I would simply say wait for the far more detailed development plan to come forward, in which it will prescribe where such pocket parks may be located.
Councillor Perry.
Clear, is this supplementary planning document have any prescriptive developments put in it at all, Councillor?
No, this supplementary planning document does not. It does in part identify areas that have already received planning permission. Had this document been forthcoming perhaps a few years ago, such planning permissions on those developments would likely have never been granted, because there would have been, and there has not been, a material consideration on which to reject those planning applications. So perhaps if the previous administration had got their act together and seriously kicked off the regeneration plans and brought forward a supplementary planning document in which to guide the planning committee and planning officers when suggesting to approve or reject an application, we wouldn't have even had those areas in this document that have already gained planning permission. So no, in answer to your question, there are no specific prescribed areas of development, there are simply identified opportunity areas.
I'm grateful, Councillor Swords, for that clarification. Councillor Durkin.
I've got 3 more questions, if I may, Chair. Okay. I know that the Cabinet member made a derogatory comment at the beginning of the outset in relation to seating, but if you're a disabled or an elderly person, actually moving around the town centre, seating is incredibly important. Could I just ask that we are creative when we are looking at space that is free and available, that we don't just look at straight line seating, that we actually look at what is classed as bendable seating and circular seating that enables people to not sit alongside each other but face each other so they can actually engage in meaningful conversation. I'm just asking, will that be please considered rather than the derogatory way it was meant in the introduction?
Councillor Durkin, I answered this question. I am grateful for that question. I think it is an important point around wider accessibility for not only those who are physically disabled, but those who may be visually impaired as well. and ensuring, as we will discuss later on, inclusion not only is reflected in the council's community policies, but within our considerations of the public realm, are absolutely foundation stones. And I think your suggestion is very helpful and something that we will consider. I know that other colleagues take accessibility incredibly seriously. And I see nodding here Councillor Carter, who is in effect our accessibility champion. And those considerations will be foremost in our minds, and I hope that that is some reassurance to you.
Yeah, thank you, and I would also like to compliment Councillor Carter, because certainly when I was a cabinet member for Regeneration, he was a champion for these particular issues, and it just shows that we did take note of the comments and the criticisms that were made at that particular time. I was just wondering, two more questions if I may. Would it be possible to be given an update about what is happening in relation to the Town Centre Master Plan regarding Acacia House site?
Councillors.
The Acacia House site, as I've mentioned to you before, the details of the progress on that are currently commercially sensitive, and I'm not going to disclose them in public. I know you have been privately in the past updated on those. The issue we had is that you went to the press with something that wasn't true on Acacia House, so it's currently commercially sensitive, and I'm not going to discuss that publicly.
And just to come in there, what I would say to Councillor Durkin, and I would say to the opposition leader, is that at the appropriate time, of course, councillors will be briefed on this matter once the commercial sensitivity is lifted and we're in a position to make that public announcement. But in this moment in time, we're not there yet, but we will be making that announcement in the coming months.
So, sorry, I missed the last bit. So when will you be making the announcement?
Those matters are commercially sensitive, as the portfolio holder has said, but we will guarantee that there will be a briefing at the appropriate time. The timescales for this are months as we endeavour to address the commercial sensitivities around this matter. At this moment in time, Councillor Durkin, that's where we are.
Thank you for the assurance. So it does seem like the business has changed significantly since the last decision was made. So my final question, which is about trying to get access to and from the town centre. A number of years ago we had an area called Little Walk, which enabled people to walk through one particular area. In the master plan, there was an indication that Little Walk would be reinstated. Is that still the position?
Councillor Zords.
Accessibility all around town centre is an extremely important issue. I currently believe that town centre is not particularly accessible, and I don't think the current setup encourages movement from one part to another. The Little Walk, well, before I come to that, the master plan throughout identifies that if it were opened up, we believe that any user would have a far better experience of the town centre, particularly when regenerated. The Little Walk area you mentioned specifically, you will know it's currently owned by Strawberry Star, and as I mentioned in response to a question earlier, had this document come forward in the past, the planning permission on that site may not have been granted, it may have been, I don't know, but there is currently planning permission on that site from Strawberry Star because there was no document of this kind previously. So if this document had come forward in the past, we might not be having this discussion now because that area would still be open. But on the wider point, yes, we absolutely want to open up town centre to make the user experience far better, far more accessible all around in all areas, and there will be no-go areas in a completely regenerated town centre because we're going to get on with the job.
And my final question is that, if I may, oh, sorry.
No worries, Councillor Durkin.
Okay, so my final question is it possible just to get a yes-no answer rather than, so is Little Walk still, is that still on the plan to be reopened to enable access to back points of the Harvey Centre? Yes or no?
I see Councillor Harlow indicating.
He'll give me a yes or no.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
That concludes my questions.
Thank you, Councillor Durkin. Questions? Councillor Edwards.
Just a general point related question. On page...
Sorry, Councillor, just were questions.
This will be a question. Page 41, it says this decision will affect Topbrook, Little Pond and Estuary, Maxwell wards. Well, given that I've had to wade through the best part of 173 pages plus whatever, my question is, going forward, and whilst I fully understand that this is a supplementary planning document, nothing is set in stone, on the other hand, I would very much appreciate, as I am sure the other councillors would for the Topbrook, Little Pond and Estuary wards, if there are future proposals going forward, that we as councillors would have democratic accountability to those wards, have the opportunity for full briefings prior to, so that we can understand the changes, etc., that are going on here. Because at the moment, what's happened was this was given out about a week ago, maybe slightly less, and we've had to wade our way through this. It would be very, very helpful to have had a briefing to say, well, okay, these are the major changes. This is what we're looking to do, which would enable us to have had an informed debate today. So far, thank you very much.
I think a question is there, Councillor Swords, over to you.
Most certainly is. Yes, in direct answer to the question, I'll endeavour to offer any briefing that members so wish where they're not commercially sensitive at that point in time. There was a second point I was going to make, but I can't remember it, so I know what it was. It's going out to consultation, so of course you can also respond to the consultation if agreed tonight, but I'll endeavour going forwards to offer briefings before such a time.
Thank you, Councillor Swords. Councillor Edwards, do you have another question?
Yeah, just another question with respect to it is going out to consultation. I think that reinforces my point in terms of local councillors being fully briefed on what it is we're consulting about, etc., and having a full understanding.
I think we've got the tenor and tone of the question that we're asking. We'll take that back, Councillor Edwards. Grateful for that. Are there any further questions? We now move to comments. Do we have comments? Councillor Durkin.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for indulging me. I have to be saying, as the former Cabinet member, I'm quietly pleased that actually 95% of everything that we were moving forward with as a council is actually included in this document. So I think that's actually a credit not only, I don't want to say myself, but actually members of the executive team, including the lady on your side there, Jane, and her team, who have worked so hard over a number of years over these particular issues. I am sorry that Andrew Johnson isn't in the room tonight, because Andrew will remember, and the other Andrew, that actually most of this was actually originally lifted from a plan from Harlow Renaissance, where we actually had a private company that came in and did a master plan, who then decided that they couldn't do it because of the economic situation and sold us the principles of it for a whole pound. And actually, if you look at that map, it is absolutely, you could put this one over the top of it, and most of it would absolutely cover it. I'm also therefore pleased that what we're really doing is rejuvenating and regenerating the regeneration of the town that we had been discussing for a number of years. So it's to our credit and to the credit of the staff and everybody involved in those particular issues. I do think there are some missed opportunities here. One of the areas that we were talking about a number of years ago was a sculpture park, and absolutely the field opposite the Water Gardens, which is currently owned by Harlow College, I believe, would have made an ideal location to increase activity and visitors coming into Harlow, because again what we need to be doing is looking at our master plan is not only just the commercial, but the tourism opportunities that we can have for the town. And I do hope, as the consultation progresses, that issue can be brought back onto the table as an opportunity to increase tourism, and certainly that would be welcome to the hotel and other industries at this particular time. There are some issues of concern. I am concerned, quite rightly, about the commitment for social housing. I know this is the town centre plan, but let's be honest, in the last 5 or 6 months, you haven't put a brick down, you haven't got a plan for a brick to go down, you've absolutely done nothing, when in fact we've got a desperate need to build council property. And actually we had, I think Johnson used to say, was it ready baked or ready cooked? It was ready to be taken off, and it's disappointing that those cases. It would be childish of me to disagree with this report. I actually welcome this report because actually what it does, it refreshes and renews items and opportunities that we have been discussing collectively for a long period of time, and it just reinforces the actions that were taken over 20 years ago by Andrew Johnson, JP Goddard, myself and others when we set up Harlow Renaissance about a real opportunity. And I do hope that we this time are able to deliver those collective ambitions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Durfee. Comments? Councillor Bates.
Thank you, Chair. I equally support this document. I also support Councillor Sword's support of the SPD, which suggested why they did so well in the general elections recently. So that was a very terrible joke, sorry. So thank you, Chair. But I think there is a habit of this Cabinet to claim that they're only people who have ever come up with a plan before. And page 37 of the initial agenda pack mentions very clearly that the Council has decided to currently pause work on the Town Centre Action and Area Action Plan due to changing retail habits, the impact of the pandemic, and changes to planning regulations in relation to the change of use. And now that particular last point is pretty important because actually the government changes to planning guidelines does make it easy to transfer buildings from one use to another. And I think the comments made by Councillor Durfee and supported by Councillor Swords about some of the permanent development in the town centre, I think we need to be very, very aware of that. And you know, this document isn't something that the administration claimed was all their idea, and I know that there were discussions between officers and the late, and I'm going to say great council person on this. Now, that's a little bit done. We often talk about the future of the town centre, and when we do it, I think we think about it as some sort of bygone age of bustling shops, lots of people shopping. But really, that's gone to some extent due to the increase in online retail. And until we are all in this room, and I'm sure we all use online retailers, are willing to change those practices, we can't go back to what is. So what I think is good about this document, and it does talk about it, and I'm sure I could talk about it more, but it does talk about the alternative uses for the town centre. I know one area of the town centre which is probably the elephant in the room is obviously the Market Square. Anecdotally, I was with Council England in 2018 when England nearly qualified for a World Cup final, and Council England was on the phone to a rather nervous CEO of Harlow Council, who was very nervous about the prospect of having a widescreen television in the middle of town, the Market Square. I'm not saying that Brian was rooting against England, but there was a little bit of relief, I think, at the final whistle. However, there's a really serious point here. Sorry, Brian. There is a serious point here, and it goes back to, I think it was last weekend, the Black History Month event. Now, sadly, the weather was not with us on that occasion. If anyone came along, poor Councillor Suter was not here. Looked very rained upon. It was but there's a lot of potential there, I think, for that area. And I think the Black History Month event, which was brilliant, even despite the weather, really shows that potential for that area. So I hope that is obviously considered. I'm sure that we'll come back to you can make that Councillor Swords, but I think we'd all support a rejuvenated town centre, and particularly a town centre where people feel safe, people feel secure, and people feel that it's part of their community. And I think that's what we need to all work together to achieve.
I see Councillor Perry.
Thank you very much, Councillor John. I'd like to to pay tribute to Councillor Swords for putting the paddles on the chest with this one and giving it a really big bolt of electricity and get it going. Because we've often heard about regeneration, we do talk about regeneration a lot in this chamber, but it's about time we got on and did it. And I've heard comments about the fact that after 5 or 6 months we're not moving quick enough. Well, what has the previous administration been in a coma for the past 10 years? Because absolutely nothing happened in terms of regeneration in the town. And so I'm grateful to Councillor Swords and the regeneration team for actually getting on and doing this and actually giving us control back of our town centre so we can actually get on with the job of regenerating it. I'm glad we hark back to Renaissance and we hark back to all the good work that Andrew Johnson, John Paul Goddard and yourself did back then. But again, the sponge of amnesia have been wiped across your collective brows because actually this administration actually packaged this all up, and unfortunately owing to the massive financial crash across the country, we packaged all this up, all this intellectual property for £1, as you rightly said, into Harlow Regeneration Limited. What happened to Harlow Regeneration Limited with all of that intellectual right? 6 months to a year in of the then new Labour administration, they shelved the company and it all fell apart, and we talked about regeneration for the next decade. And then we're in administration now again, within 5-6 months, we're getting back control of our town centre. We're starting to put forward a non-prescriptive SDP so we can actually start to get back control. And we're not moving fast enough. Well, I think we are moving fast enough. We're going to get it right. We're going to take on board all of the comments in terms of future plans to make sure that it is accessible, it is open to all, and it's a vibrant place. And I'm really, really pleased to see it. And I'm glad we have the support of the opposition in this, and 95% of this, because actually regeneration is a cross-party endeavour, and I'm really, really pleased. I'll give this my 100% endorsement. Congratulations to everyone who's been involved.
Comments? Councillor Harlow.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you all for your comments, but I would say, I would encourage you, those who have not read it, to read the 174 pages. I've had to read them 3 times. Put me to sleep, it's quite good. But please do read them, and please do submit your comments as part of the consultation, because really we want everybody's views on this. Thank you.
Are there any further comments from the floor? I see no further comments. Can I move to Councillor Swords to wrap us up?
Thank you. I'll do my best to answer some of the points that were raised and then do exactly that and wrap us up. Councillor Perrin's just stolen my thunder on moving fast enough. I accept perhaps 5 or 6 months is not as fast as I would have liked. I would have liked to have been done on day one. But nevertheless, untangling 9 years has proved not to be the easiest of tasks. In agreement with Councillor Durkin, this is an area we absolutely do agree on, and I know on that there are not many. But I have seen, as he has, the genuine unbelievable work that council officers in the regeneration team and the planning team, by the way, it wasn't all regeneration, planning also, do throughout, have done in this. In the last 12 months alone, have secured, in the region of 90 million quid for regeneration, which is unbelievable. Of course, in June alone, for instance, we pulled in 23.7 million to get on with the job of regenerating this. So, on record, my thanks for that. You mentioned the old Scotland plans for regeneration from the Harlow Renaissance days. The mere difference I would point out, and why this is not a carbon copy of the Scotland plans, there are many differences, but the key one I would point out, I think I've highlighted a few times tonight. This is what's called a supplementary planning document. That was a development plan, and they are 2 very different things. We'll talk about a few missed opportunities in this, and I look forward to seeing your ideas in the consultation. I would say any missed opportunities that we've had in 5 or 6 months are probably less so than in 9 years. talks about not laying bricks yet. And I saw Councillor Carter smirk at the point of not laying bricks. I can only presume that Councillor Durkin was referring to the house building pipeline, of which, as I mentioned earlier, we are moving full steam ahead on. That work perhaps has not been made any easier by the plans we were left with. And I recall in March there was a particularly heated cabinet meeting then about the council's house building programme. So I've dug out a few figures that I'm going to cite shortly, but I would just say that the previous administration did not build many council houses apart from the Pathfinder project. Indeed, the only other two that you kicked off were the Bushy Croft development and For the Hill. We are not going to copy that. We are going to get on and build social housing across the town to meet the needs, to meet the pledges that we were elected on in May. But that work has not been made any easier, perhaps, by a couple of things I want to quote. The Perry Road site, for instance, I know Councillor Durkin was particularly proud of at the time. That scheme to build 59 units, as it was proposed then, for near enough all affordable, with a structuring of social housing. £600,000 was spent on your watch, and we are no further ahead with that. Stackfield, £67,790 was spent on that. Never got off the ground. The land between Brentford Towers, which you were proposing as part of that building pipeline, you spent £128,247 on, never got off the ground. I could go on with many others, but the point I'm trying to make is that we are not wasting money on projects that are never going to get off the ground. We're getting on with the job of building social housing, and you will see coming forward very shortly a refreshed house building pipeline that will deliver across the town. Another point that Councillor Lynch made, I'm trying to wrap through these, so I do apologise. About permitted development, right, you're absolutely right, there has been changes to permitted development, which, while one of the first things we did was reapply for the Article 4 directive and beefed up the Article 4 directive to ensure that we can stop that across the town. But ultimately, this document does something that I think I would not be wrong in saying the previous administration did not, and that is getting on with the job. There are, I'm accused of boosterism and talking up things far too much, far too often. One thing I will not apologise for is talking up the plans we have to regenerate this town centre from top to bottom, to rebuild it. I cannot stress enough that we are not just talking about repaving or a park in Market Square or umbrellas or concrete tables or the infamous Harlow District League ping pong tournaments that now go on those wonderful ping pong tables in Market Square that I've not ever seen anyone use. We are talking about genuine rebuilding of this town centre to ensure it is one of the best, and that is not boosterism, it is one of the best in the country to shop, to socialise, to entertain, to eat, to enjoy leisure time. And I want to respond finally to a point that Councillor Vince, I think, made in an interview that was published today. Forgive me for not making it all the way through 9 minutes, but he's also just reinforced it, that I'm trying to somehow take sort of credit for the previous administration's work, or 95% of it, or of course that wonderful phrase of rewriting history. That could not be further from the truth, and I want to be as clear as possible. I'm tearing up the documents, the plans, the reviews that have gathered dust on shelves because they were never delivered under that Labour administration. I'm pretty much backing all you said about regeneration, not for political point scoring, not for personal gain, but to deliver on a pledge that we made to the people of this town to regenerate the town centre, and that is exactly what this document kicks off the work of doing, and I'm glad we now have your support to move forward with it.
Thank you, Councillor Sauce. We now come to the vote, but before we do that, I have an amendment to the recommendations. On recommendation B, where it says delegates authority to the Director of Strategic Growth and Regeneration, we will insert delegates authority to the Director of Strategic Growth and Regeneration in consultation with the portfolio holder for regeneration. Are all those in favour of the amendment to the Cabinet report? And on that basis, with the amended sentence to paragraph B, are all those in favour of approving the Master Plan Framework SPD approval for consultation? That report is carried. Okay, we now move to the next agenda item, under agenda item 11, approval of amendments to the Enterprise Zone Local Development Orders, pages 48 to 86. Can I ask for a proposer? I see Councillor Harlow, seconder. Councillor Swords. Councillor Harlow, would you like to introduce this report?
Thank you, Chairman. Now for something far more exciting. To get a bit technical, so just bear with me. An LDO is a local development order. They came into being at the same time as neighbourhood plans. And broadly what one is a council can agree a certain area, if applications meet certain criteria, they don't have to go through the full planning system. We have an LDO in place for the enterprise zone, and the whole idea was to fast track applications through the plans process and speed up occupation. In the fullness of time, it is clear that there needs to be some amendments to it, as it's not working quite as it was designed. The appendix to the report is quite technical, and I will just summarise the key points for you all. First one is removing the descriptions of different development zones and creating one large development zone so it is flexible. Removing the requirement that all ancillary uses, such as retail, cafe, gyms, etc., must be located at the edge, making it so that they could be anywhere. It also contains a limit on the amount of retail and restaurant and leisure use. That's going to stay the same. Changes to the permitted road layout to reflect what's actually being built. The previous one was too prescriptive. Amendments to pick up the changes in use classes which have come through. And also to extend the LDO for a further 10 years. Following, hopefully, approval today, this will go out for public consultation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harlow. Questions?
Stop looking at me.
Councillor Durkin, you're on the line side, and I will value your questions. Are there any further questions? No? We move to comments. Are there any comments? There we are, Councillor Durkin.
No, to be perfectly honest, I welcome this report because this is about evolution. This was always going to be something that would have to come back and would have to be reviewed periodically as things change. So actually, I think the report is welcomed. I believe consultation is appropriate, and I hope we get the right response. So yes, I think it's a good report.
Are there any further comments? I see there are no further comments. Can I ask Councillor Harlow to wrap up?
I'm not quite sure how I would back that up, but yes, I mean these are, as you say, evolutionary changes that we have to make sure that the local development order remains appropriate and reflects what's needed for the occupants.
Thank you, Councillor Harlow. Our Cabinet happy to agree this report on the approval of amendments to the Enterprise Zone Local Development Orders. Agreed? Thank you, colleagues. We now move to the next agenda item, which is item 12 in your agenda pack, which is the adoption of affordable housing supplementary planning document, pages 87 to 150. Can I have a proposer, please? I see Councillor Harlow. Do I see a seconder? Councillor Carter. Councillor Harlow, would you like to introduce this report?
Thank you, Chairman. This will be familiar to many of you, as it was agreed and for consultation by Cabinet in February. It's also been discussed a number of times with the then local plan panel and then subsequently the town plan panel. The consultation has been completed and responses have been listed in the annex to the report. The schedule identifies officers' responses to each of the comments made. And now comes forward for approval. I think it's quite straightforward what we need to do.
Thank you, Councillor Harlow. Questions from councillors? I see no questions. Are there comments? see my learned friend who would like to come in. Would you like to ask your question?
Thank you, Chair. I've only been here 23 years. So. I actually welcome this report. It's a legal requirement. It doesn't need much introduction. I can understand why Councillor Harlow didn't make much of an introduction, because actually it's a legal requirement. The supplementary planning supplement. There's actually a few comments I just want to make. The SPD will now make a material consideration in the determining of any planning application. So the real proof of pudding won't come now. It'll come in a couple of years' time once the applications start rolling in. It also provides further guidance for every single council, including this council, to what we expect in the way of affordable housing. The comment I think I'd like to make, Chair, is certainly around affordability, when there's a paragraph on affordability within this document, where the affordability of affordable housing, which by the way, affordable housing is an absolute statement. I hate the familiar term affordable housing, because affordable housing is different to every single person. My concern, and I'm sorry, a lot of people within my group are certainly concerned regarding the phrase affordable housing, is because when we get planning applications, many of these developers hide behind affordable housing, and in fact what they offer as affordable housing is surely not affordable to most people. It says clearly in this document that we have to take in mind when setting rents and sales prices, etc. The vast majority of the thousands of people within our housing list cannot afford market rent, etc. If they could afford market rent, they wouldn't be on our housing list, basically. Social rent is clearly the way forward for people of this town that are in desperate need for housing. So the comment I've made, Chair, is that I think going forward, when the applications come in, this council should be extremely mindful that social rent must be the way forward to clear out our housing situation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Wilkinson. Do we have any further comments? Councillor Carter.
Thank you. Just a follow-up from Councillor Wilkinson. This document has been kicking around for quite a while. I've seen it in various venues over the last year or so. I just want to highlight on page 99 of the agenda under affordability. 2.6, the Council's preference is for affordable rent units to be let on a social rent, as this will ensure maximum affordability. So the policy is there, and it's very early on in the document, and there is absolute clarity as to what this authority wants to see in terms of affordable housing. There has been one development since we started writing this document was the review by scrutiny by Councillor Edwards into the supply of housing for people doing difficulties. One of the good things to come out of that is that Essex County Council is a lot more open to talking to us, which is a key feature in this document. Thank you.
Comments? Any further comments? Okay. On that basis, can I look to Councillor Hardware to wrap us up?
Yes, as Councillor Wilkinson said, this is a statutory document. It's been kicking around for quite some time. I'm sure that in the fullness of time it will have to be revised again, but we are where we are, so I would suggest that this is approved. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hardware. We have recommendations A and B. If all those are agreed, please state that you are. Agreed. This report is carried. We now move on to agenda item 13, which is the Community Resilience Strategy. That's on pages 151 to 173. I will be proposing this report. Do I have a seconder? I have a seconder, Councillor Perry. I'll just set out some opening remarks for this Community Resilience Strategy. First of all, can I personally thank the officers who worked closely with me to develop this plan, Jane Marie and Christine Howard, who have worked with me since I took up the role of the portfolio holder for community resilience. This is a particularly important strategy document because it informs the portfolio that I took on in May. As we know, we are now in a position where we've come out of lockdown and are thinking about our post-COVID future as a town. And as a result of that, we have an obligation as an administration to set out the building blocks for how we build back better from a community perspective. And taking that into consideration, this strategy has a number of pillars. Those pillars, I think, are central to this strategy. There are 6 of them that highlight at a high level what this council will do in order to respond to the community challenges that we have built up over the coronavirus and want to move forward in a positive way. You'll see in the 6 pillars there, for example, the council's leadership role. We want to boost that going forward, and we've set out some strategic considerations to move that forward. Arts and culture, community engagement, safer communities, health inequalities. These are the building blocks of a strategic narrative that we want to communicate around increasing resilience, reducing inequality, and enhancing inclusion in this town. How are we going to go about doing that as a result of this high-end strategy? Well, there will be other tactical work that is informed at the back pages of this strategy. It will go out for a 6-week consultation, but I want to just end on a few other considerations. The key theme that flows throughout this strategy is, yes, addressing exclusion, but championing opportunity and prosperity in this town and strengthening community engagement. That is an area of focus that I will continue to champion. I think this strategy inevitably, as I say in my foreword, is the first step, but only by working with those community leaders. Some of those are carried with quotes throughout this strategy. Can we, with a renewed sense of purpose, deliver on some of the challenges that we have to build a stronger community post-COVID? I look forward now to questions from councillors. Do I see any questions? Councillor Edwards.
First of all, I just wanted to, I've got a number of questions, Councillor Charles, but I'd like to put that first of all in the context of sort of welcoming this report in the first instance. So I hope that my comments will be seen as constructive ones, because I think we all agree that we need to, be moving on in this area. So my first question is around the data that we'll be using. Will we have some baseline data or statistics or whatever attached to these reports, and if so, what baseline data will we be using?
That's an important point, Councillor Edwards, and as I have said before, one of the key core central data sets that we're awaiting, and the 18-month period that we've gone through, it's particularly important that we receive these, is the joint strategic needs assessment that takes into consideration things like health inequalities. As I've said to you before, what is fundamental in my approach to the portfolio is an evidence-led approach. So the pillars that we've identified will need to be boosted by the data that we will in future receive. We're still awaiting that data set. That will also inform the health and wellbeing strategy. At the moment we can only have a strategic positioning statement, but all of this will be informed by evidence so that we can carry forward those pillars. What I would say to you is I would take into consideration this document is a high-level strategic narrative which will be informed by detailed plans, some of which are indicated at the back pages of this. I know that we've gone through it with Jane, but my pledge is to use the evidence to inform our approach going forward, working with community leaders.
May carry on that. So if I may carry on.
Of course, yeah.
So my next question, which you've already in a sense answered, is I would anticipate there will be some smart targets being attached to various processes. On page 159, there's a reference there to the fact that we have the lowest average employment income in England and Essex. We also know that we've got over 11,000 people on universal credit. We also know that there's marked economic disparity across the wards, various wards in the town, and that's been mapped on a number of occasions. So my question to you is, would you consider, as well as the pillars that you've got there, would you consider adding an economic inequality pillar? Because, you could either be termed in terms of economic inequality or financial sustainability as one of the pillars, so that we could really need to do a fair bit of work around that area.
Councillors, I think that is a fair challenge. But what I would say to you, of course, we've got this 6-week consultation, and we've already begun that consultation with you, and we will have what in effect will be a special COVID recovery group meeting that will go through this report in detail with members. But my commitment is to also work with community leaders to identify if the pillars that we have set out in this paper are where they need to be. I believe that they are. One of the key threads that runs throughout the strategy is extending opportunity and prosperity, because we recognise that there are areas in this town where we need to do more. And there is an absolute commitment from this administration to eradicate poverty wherever we see it. Only a few weeks ago did we hear the good news by Streets to Homes that no one was sleeping homeless, and that is a credit to our town and a charity that does fantastic work. And I recognise all those individuals who work for Streets to Homes, because it is a class act, frankly. But look, I hear you around your additional pillar, but I would urge you to contribute to the consultation, and I look forward to hearing other ideas. I will take an open mind for those types of suggestions that come in as a result of the consultation process in the next 6 weeks. But thank you for your suggestion.
I will be making further suggestions as we go through, so come back. Page 165, it talks about the actively promoting the arts and cultural agenda. It also talks about, in particular, it talks about the town's public sculptures as standard bearers for promoting culture. Just a minor point really, but just to remind ourselves that most of those sculptures aren't in fact owned by the council, they're owned by the Harlow Arts Trust. And I think it would be useful at some point to get the Harlow Arts Trust included as a partner in this document as it works, because there doesn't appear to be a mention of them.
Shall I just answer that question? As it happens, Jane and I have met the Harlow Arts Trust and are looking to do a range of partnership working with them. One of the motivations you will see on page 165 is to reorientate the vision around arts and culture more generally in this 10-year vision statement, which I think is an exciting project, something that we've already discussed with the Harlow Arts Trust. But my commitment to you, Tony, they are an absolute valuable stakeholder, and they will be involved in future discussions, and that's the commitment that I make to them.
Thank you. Moving on to page 167, where it picks up the question of community engagement. It talks about council being digital by default, which is not at the expense of those that cannot access services. So currently there's nothing in the report as to how they will achieve that in terms of those that don't access services in a default way. So there's, I think that needs strengthening.
And just to come in there, the rest of that paragraph is making sure all digital functions are accessible to people with all abilities is a fundamental commitment. Remember, Councillor Edwards, this is a top-end strategic document that states the direction of travel and will be informed by detailed action plans to endeavour to achieve the ambitions we set out. I would also direct you to the Equalities policy, whereby we said that this council's intent as an administration is to factor in where we want to move and shift, transform services, that we do not forget all the groups that form part of this town, and we ensure accessibility is a fundamental thing that runs through all the policies and initiatives this administration carries forward.
I just reinforce that in the sense of, because there are a significant number of people in this town who do not have digital access, and I still think that needs to be strengthened. Simon is nodding in agreement.
And I would just reinforce with you that we make it explicitly clear in that paragraph that we will not, because the very definition of this strategy is promoting inclusion. And so I was very clear when we were drafting this in this paragraph that we made sure that there is parity between all abilities and ensuring that each community is able to access the council services on an equal footing. It's a fundamental principle spelled out in our equality policy as well.
Page 168, when we're talking about health inequalities, whilst I fully understand that in terms of this report it is very much looking forward, but I suppose just a word of caution really is that we're not out of this by any means yet, and there's no mention, we in the town have one of the lowest levels of COVID vaccination take-up when one looks in terms of across the county, in comparison to other areas across the county. So and consistently compared with the English national averages, we're between 3 and 4% on all of the scores below what's going on in terms of the English national average in terms of vaccination take-up. So I would argue that we've still got, that there's possibly a need for something to go in there around the continuation of reinforcing the message with regard to vaccination and what other health messages come out.
Just on that point, Councillor Edwards, one of the fundamental drivers of this strategy is that we are not complacent about the existing challenges, but to move and prime our efforts going forward in a post-COVID world. We address those health inequalities that are borne out by the data. And we don't have the most up-to-date data yet. I'm very keen and anxious, as all councillors I'm sure are, to see that data so that it can inform our judgments on how we address health inequalities. Not to preempt it, but the health and wellbeing strategy positioning statement, it's a mouthful I know, will inform how we complement our colleagues in primary care are out there delivering day in and day out, and they face a whole range of pressures that, as a community leader, this council is conscious it needs to do as much as it can to support not just the GPs, but also not just our primary care partners, but also acute care and what our fantastic colleagues in the hospital are trying to achieve as well.
Moving on to page 169, when we start to talk about safe communities. Now it's interesting that again there are no baseline figures in there. What particularly concerns me is that we know that Harlow has the highest level in the county of domestic violence per head, and as Robert Halfon and others have said, it's horrific that rates of domestic violence are so high. So why is there no mention in there specifically of violence against women in this report?
There is, Councillor Edwards. We support safe partnerships, priority subgroups, of which one of them is addressing violence against women.
In which case I'd like to see that sort of reinforced, please, if I may. Finally, you spoke in terms of the consultation protocol, not quite finally, penultimately. You spoke in terms of the consultation process. You're anticipating a 6-week consultation process. Do we know when that's likely to be beginning?
Thanks, Councillor. We will endeavour to begin that consultation process as soon as we can. Subject to this report being agreed, we will set up the pathway and the timescales, but our commitment is a 6-week consultation process and communications will follow thereafter.
And given that, and now this is finally, given that this is the 5th draft, why were there not any discussions with the COVID recovery group prior to this paper being presented as cabinet? And given that we we've only had one meeting of the COVID recovery group since the administration were elected.
This is an administration document because it dictates my portfolio, Councillor Edwards, as the Community Resilience Portfolio Holder. This is the principles that this administration will follow to address community need in the post-COVID world. It is up to this administration and this administration alone to set up the building blocks of this response as an administration, as the Council's leadership function, which is fundamental to seeing how we recover going forward. The social challenges that we face, we all are acutely aware of, but it is my responsibility, alongside my colleagues, to set out strategic intent. We have endeavoured to achieve that in this document. And going forward in the COVID Recovery Group meeting, which will be a consultation process, you will have ample opportunity to have a far more detailed discussion that we have opted for in this Cabinet meeting, and I look forward to that.
If I may make a comment then, it would appear that there's been a...
Councillor Edwards, not all comments yet. You can, but questions, and then we'll get into comments.
No further question.
Any further questions from colleagues? I see no further questions. We'll move into comments. Councillor Saggers.
Having been a member of the local community through Scouting, I welcome the document and its emphasis on the next generation coming through and how Council's commitment to obviously bringing people forward, obviously child obesity and things is something we're trying to combat and trying to get children away from the screens that they now adopt and the internet they use, out playing, out into the fields, getting fresh air, because Harlow is a green town, and we welcome being able to use that. Also, I welcome the fact that being biased, it did talk about Harlow Museum, which is obviously my board. It's a great place to be, great for the people there. Lastly, it does talk about internet access for those, and being a IT member champion, I'm also keen on the government's recommendation to try and get every household or every person to have access to the internet by 2030. It does help that we have the Cato Centre not too short away from here with NVIDIA committing quite rightly to a 5-year plan to really bring home digital in Harlow, the biggest data centre in the South East, so we'll see about bringing jobs and revenue to the council there. So I look forward to it.
Thank you, Councillor Sackers. Comments? Councillor Perry.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say I welcome this document. I think it's an extremely important document. And I'd like to pay tribute and thanks to all the officers that have been involved in the construction of this document. I'm glad to hear that we have cross-party support for this and the tenets that it sets out, but I'd also like to pay personal tribute to you, Councillor Charles, because I was reflecting when I was sitting here. It's been almost 17 years since I first met you, and I don't think in that time your commitment to community engagement, to addressing inequality has ever waned, and I think it's been one of those things that's at foremost at the centre of why you're in politics. And I can see that reflected in this document. It underlines this administration's, should we say, intent, drive, ambition to try and level up communities, to address the inequalities, but also to engage with that community sector and bring others in and work with them to also tackle some of the difficult challenges that we face. The pandemic having exacerbated many of those, but nonetheless, to try and address those fundamental inequalities in society. And I know that's something that you've always been passionate about, and I pay tribute to you for your work in this area. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Perry. Comments? Councillor Edwards, and then I'll come to Councillor Edwards.
Sorry, someone let others speak.
There's many. Councillor Edwards first.
Let others speak first, and then I'll come in a little bit later.
Councillor Vince.
Thank you, Chair. I've come to expect a lot of things from Cabinet, but I didn't expect a compliment from the Chair about my day job, so thank you for that. I, like my colleague, welcome a community resilience strategy and equally thank those officers who have taken on the task of creating it. I do think we need to be aware, as Councillor Edwards said, that COVID-19 is still with us and cases are currently rising. And I think we need to make sure we don't get too carried away on that one. I do share Councillor Edwards' concerns about the consultation with the working group, and I appreciate the comments that you've made. But I really want to emphasise the importance of that working group. And I know, Chair, that you were involved with Councillor Harvey from the very creation of that group. It's a shame also that Councillor Harvey, as I say, who was heavily involved in that group, isn't here today. But I really hope that the new leader of Harlow Council, whoever that might be, will be as keen as his predecessor for cross-party working. That's something that Councillor Johnson spoke a lot about, the importance of was cross-party working, particularly in something like this, which is, ultimately, we all know this pandemic has affected everybody, whatever their political colours. And I also appreciate the strategic overarching document. This is a strategic overarching document, and some of the detail will come later. But I do look forward to seeing the nuts and bolts underneath it, and some really key strategies to move this town forward after what's been a pretty awful time for everybody. And I know our group have obviously suffered a very personal tragedy. But to finish on a more positive note, Councillor Saggers, it's the sort of political bias I like, as long as you recognise that Little Pardon has to be successful. But yeah, thank you, Chair.
Councillor Edwards.
Yes, just to reiterate my welcome to this document. The other thing I think is important is to recognise this is going to be a rolling document. I mean, you mentioned in the instruction that being effectively looking in terms of 3-year planning, etc. I think going forward, I think as I was saying earlier, we're not out of the woods yet, and we're certainly not out of the economic woods yet. In terms of, I suspect that's going to roll on for a few years. So, which is going to put a huge amount of strains, I think, on the town and on the resilience of the town. So, yes, we look forward to working in a cross-party way in terms of the strengthening of this document, and I look forward to sitting down with you and with the COVID recovery group to again just sort of going through this a little bit further, teasing out what your thoughts are, but equally adding to them hopefully in terms of and strengthening the document, because we want to do that in a constructive way. Thank you.
Councillor Carter.
Thank you, Chair. It's a very big document, a very big strategy, which hopefully every council across the country is doing as we sort of try and move out of the COVID crisis. I very much appreciate it's going to be it's going to affect the entire community, and therefore quite right that we consult with the wider community. And in a small way, just to reassure Councillor Edwards, I have had a promise tonight from Councillor Charles that this topic will be available in large print. But also, I shall be watching or helping, hopefully, in how you reach out to the hard-to-reach groups and presenting this document in as many ways as possible.
Further comments? I see no further comments. I will just briefly wrap up. This is by no means a document that's going to address the matters that we know are very apparent in our post-COVID world overnight. It will take time to embed this strategy and deliver the individual pillar actions following consultation. But it is a clear roadmap that this administration wants to pursue for the council, and it's about refocusing our energy on what needs to be happening once we get to a point where we're looking like a recovery, and then looking towards the future of our community in particular. Wider economic challenges are at the forefront of our mind, and we have seen in previous documents some of the considerations around the built environment. But my determination through this strategy is to reach out to those diverse groups that make up what is great about this town, the charities, the volunteers who spearheaded over the last 18 months a heroic attempt to make sure those vulnerable people in our town are protected. And they should be at the forefront of our minds, and they know they are. But we will do more to support those individuals and empower them in the future so that we have a stronger community. We've gone through a number of challenges over the decades in this town, but what should be born out of this future is a determination as a community leader to reach out and enhance this community, because we know, and this town knows, that we are the greatest town in this country. I am proud of that. I'm born and bred in this town, as are others in this room, but we need to do more. We recognise that challenge, and this is the very start of that programme of activity. On that basis, and after summing up, recommendations A and B of this report on the community resilience strategy. Do I hear there is agreement? The report is agreed. We now move to the next agenda item, which is the Splash Park Contract Award on pages 174 to 180. Councillor Perry, do you propose this?
I do.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Swords. Councillor Perry, would you like to introduce your report?
Thank you, Chair. And last but not least, some good news as well. We've had lots of good news this evening, but I'm really pleased to be moving this forward. I'm just going to orientate us through the report because I think many of us are aware of the evolution of splash parks, and it's glad to be able to bring them forward and bring them into life. The reason for this decision is obviously to enable the council to enter into a contract for works in compliance with contract standing orders for the delivery of a new splash park and padding pool facility at Staple Tye. In getting to here, this has obviously been part of a consultation process. The residents of Staple Tye have obviously wanted this new splash park facility while still complementing the existing paddling pool facility there. I'd like to pay tribute to the paddling pool user group who have also contributed in the development of this programme. And what is proposed is, as I said, option 2 in the document, which is to provide a splash park facility, which for members that are interested, the outline diagram is in the appendix at the back, but also to improve the existing paddling pool facility that's there. This is a fantastic thing. If approved tonight, should be underway and completed. Work will commence on site, in February next year. And I'm quite happy, Chair, at that moment to take questions and comments.
Thank you, Councillor Perry. Do we have questions? We have two. Let me start with Councillor Davies.
When this is constructed, do you envisage that this will be free for the use of Harlow people?
Absolutely. Concerns all of the paddling pools are free currently, and any splash parks and paddling pools will continue to be free. Not made any mood music or any insinuation that it should be anything other than free. No, I'm just making absolutely clear that I think it's a vital part of our community, and I'm very proud that we have these facilities in the town for people to use for pool use. In fact, my own children have used the paddling pool a number of times over the years, and indeed I did when I was young, and I'd like to see them continue on.
Councillor Durkin.
Whilst I welcome this initiative, there's one question. I noticed that all the other paddling pools were upgraded at the cost of $333,000. Does this include this Staple Tye paddling pool? Because I have to be honest, I think most people are probably quite surprised how expensive this initiative is, and that therefore there isn't an awful lot of cash left from the ring fence money from Ramgors. So is there going to be an early opportunity for us to be looking at a second site, as long as it falls within that window of ring fence money?
Councillor Perry.
Myself and cabinet colleagues are of the mind that once we've seen how this project goes, we're quite happy to review it and to continue on, even if it falls within that budget envelope. So yes, is the answer to your question.
Okay, and what about the first council question? Did the 333,000 include this upgrade? Because then what we're saying is that the splash pool itself costs 490,000.
Yes, indeed.
the cost that was initially in this document, which was brought forward to the scrutiny committee back in 2020, was seen as a baseline cost. So the term that's been used is that it was a virginal site. So it was based on it being a completely clean site. Since then, we've had about a 20% uplift in building costs, and there are other costs associated with the fact that it is not actually a clean site. So that would account for the increase in costings. I'm quite happy to, outside this meeting, give you a bit more detailed breakdown of that if you require it, Councillor.
Sorry, my final. Just before we do that, Councillor, we've reached the point in time where we need to agree as a cabinet that we're happy to continue the meeting. Are colleagues of the opinion that we continue? Can I get agreement for that? Agreed. Thank you.
Apologies, sorry, my final question to you, Russell. Stop making me green. Does that mean that other sites will be less than the nearly $500,000, or will it be similar? And my final one, which is probably a bit of a cheap point, but as a local councillor, as this money is ring-fenced from the development of Roundabout, it is annoying that actually people can't even get across the road because, and I would just hope some monies are going to be invested in that local community.
Thank you for your question. Your question was, are we going to invest more, are other sites going to cost similar? I can't give you a qualified answer on that at the moment because the initial costing was based on a clean site, and each future site will have to be assessed on its own merit. So I can't give that as a qualified answer. And as to your cheeky answer, I'm not going to commit myself to anything here and now. Thank you. Although I salute your attempts to try and stand up for your community.
You won't think I was in election.
And just hang on one second, Councillor. And of course, we are reminded that this budget envelope was instigated by the previous administration. And so the funding arrangements we have inherited here, and as Councillor Perrin said, there will be a review going forward. Councillor Durkin. Any questions?
Oh God, no, you've had enough of me.
Any further questions? Councillor Edwards.
Just certainly welcome this going forward, and we've had the cross-party discussion that was held at scrutiny. You can remember David Carter and I wandering around the sites and subsequently making some recommendations, and that they've been picked up. One of the things I did notice in here, there is going to be you're planning to have some toilet provision on that site. In terms of the other sites, there was certainly a request when the discussions were going on about enhancing toilet provision, and I wouldn't want those to be lost sight of going forward, as it were, because I think that is something that we still, certainly at some of the sites, we still need to address.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. I will just cover that off. Of course, we had an extended scrutiny committee session where we looked at the town park paddling pool, but the wider brief of how we focus not only on the maintenance programme for paddling pools more generally in the town, but toilet facilities. We will, as we discussed, we were aware of the budget around about 70k for temporary toilets. That the review of that is all packaged up as part of our work, not only as administration to look at the budget for the MTFS and our future forward planning when it comes to the finances. But as you were aware, because you were sitting in the chair, that is something that we're taking into consideration actively. Any further questions? I see no further questions. Are there comments? I see comments from Councillor Harlow.
As the staple, or one of the staple tie councillors, we're very grateful for the investment from Roundabout's development into our community, and I for one will be testing the facilities when they are finished.
No, the chair's got to do something about a sponsored activity for that. That would be worth seeing and painful.
He's got that to do Thank you, Councillor Harlow. Are there any, that's taken me out of my stride. Are there any further comments from colleagues on the Splash Park contract award? If If there are not, I will hand over to Councillor Perrin to wrap this up.
Suffice it to say, I hope that the residents of Stapletide get great use out of this. I hope the children and big children of Stapletide also get a great deal of use of this. And actually, whilst we do have paddling pool sites around the town, whilst this is a novelty, I hope all the children and big children in the town also get some fun out of this. So thank everyone for their support on this, and I look forward to it actually being turned on sometime next year, hopefully. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Perrin. We have recommendation A for the Splash Park contract award. Can I see those in agreement? Agreed. This contract award is agreed. On that basis, we move on to item 15 in the agenda for tonight's meeting, communications from committees, working groups, parties and panels. I am so informed by our officers that there are no communications for us to note. Item 16, minutes of panels, working groups. Again, there are no items to note. On that basis, we move to item 17, matters of urgent business. There are none, and I therefore declare the meeting closed at, I would see it as 9:35. Thank you very much.